Welcome to Fantasia, home of the Melodious. My name's Azallea, and today, gonna be bringing you guys an updated version of my Melodious deck. So let's get right into it, and I'll explain as we go along. So first off, we run 3 copies of Arya, the Melodious Diva. Pretty standard in all Melodious builds. She gives all your Melodious monsters targeting and battle immunity. So 3 of those definitely. Now, a little thing that I changed for this build is I run 3 copies of Solo, the Melodious Songstress. A lot of you guys have been requesting that I test her out and play around with her. I have in the past, but she was really subpar until I designed this build, which kind of revolves around her. It switches between Arya and Solo depending on if I'm going aggressive or defensive, which is pretty cool. So basically her effect is when she's destroyed by battle, you can summon any Melodious monster from your deck. Just keep in mind that she conflicts with Arya, so maybe not the best to have both of them out at the same time. However, she is very useful if you don't have access to Arya early on in the game. Next off, we play 3 copies of Soprano, the Melodious Songstress. Very standard. She recovers any Melodious monster from your graveyard and adds it back to your hand if she's special summoned, and she also allows us to go into her fusion monsters. And I don't play Polymerization or Tam in this build, so she's basically our only way to access our fusions. So next off, we play 3 copies of Sonata, Melodious Diva. Just adds a lot of attack to our monsters, very good for swinging for damage, and also great in combination with Soprano for fusion plays. So moving on, we're going into the singles that we play. I play 1 copy of Score, the Melodious Diva. Now, Score is not as good as Honest, but it is still a very, very strong card. The only reason I play 1 is because Soprano can actually recover her from the graveyard when she's special summoned. So that's really cool. Little nice interaction where you can just beat over your opponent's monsters. Next off, 1 copy of Cannon. Since this deck is more of a main deck centered, we don't really tap in the extra deck that much. And I'll explain why when we get there to the traps, but basically, she's just there for a quick field presence or for a quick fusion with Soprano. Not the main focus of the build, but still gives us access to stuff, gives us options. Kind of like Hat Tricker in Before Mages. Next off, we play 1 copy of Sopina, the Melodious Maestra. She just allows us to recover cards from the grave, gain advantage, very, very strong card, especially because we run Solo, so you can summon her straight from the deck and not have to worry about drawing her unless you open up with her. But yeah, very, very strong card. Makes it even stronger, Honest. Honest makes this entire deck like a complete threat when the monsters are on the field because this card exists and your opponent will never know whether or not you have it. So very, very strong card, Honest, definitely. And Sopina can recover him from the graveyard, so use him to your heart's content. Don't be afraid of running out of resources because Sopina will always be there. Okay, so next we run 2 copies of Maxi. Thank you, Premium Gold. Now we have access to some form of draw power, and this hand trap is also very, it's a deterrent for your opponent, so they don't go off and special summon everything in your face, right? They'll be more conservative with their plays, which is very good for us because we want a slower game state. Next off, we play 2 copies of Effect Veiler. One of the best hand traps in the game, just stops anything that's remotely threatening or stops a combo piece that your opponent really needs, like Skullcombat Joker or something. Just very, very strong card overall. And because we run Max C, we have the increased chance of drawing to Effect Veiler and Honest during your opponent's turn when they're comboing off. So we can actually stop entire pushes with just an Honest in hand, or we can stop an entire combo with just a Veiler in hand. So Maxi becomes that much better just because of the fact that we're running all of these other hand traps along with it. So there we go. That's it for the monsters. Next off, we're going to go into the spell cards. So first, obviously be running 3 copies of First Movement Solo. Grabs any level 4 lower Melodious monster straight from the deck onto the field. So you have Arya, Solo, and Soprano as your main targets. Works really, really well if you open it first turn. Set up your field with Arya and then just go from there. Next off, we play 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. I always like main decking some form of spell trap removal because back row, monarchs, pendulums. There's always some deck out there that has spell or traps that are either continuous or that a lot of disruptive back row, right? So next off, we play 1 copy of Twin Twister. I didn't play this in my previous builds because the fact that we could never generate enough advantage, but because we run solo that grabs us Sopina and Soprano so much faster and puts them on the field, we have so many cards in hand that we can't normal summon out, right? So we have a lot of dead monsters in our hand, and those can be pitched with Twin Twisters. Next off, we play 1 copy of Soul Charge, revives all our monsters if we are in need. And 1 copy of Raigeki, destroys all your opponent's monsters when we are in need of it. So yeah, those are just the spells. As you notice, I don't play a lot of spells as compared to my other builds, and I don't run Summoner Monks because Solo has replaced Summoner Monk's little role of grabbing whatever we need from the deck. And since we don't play enough spells, Summoner Monk becomes a little less useful. Alright, so moving on to traps, we play 3 copies of Powerful Rebirth, grabs any level 4 or lower from our graveyard, and when Powerful Rebirth is removed from the field, our monster gets to stay. So much, much better than Call the Haunted in that regard. Next off, we play, here it is, the stun part of the build. So we play 3 copies of Rivalry of Warlords. This is also a reason why I don't play Summoner Monk, because he's a spellcaster and he conflicts with the rest of our deck, which are all fairies. So basically, Rivalry of the Warlords makes it so both players can only control 1 type of monster, and since the meta is composed of all these decks that have varying types, monarchs have spellcasters, fiends, warriors, fairies, zombies, Perform Palace have beast, spellcasters, dragons, and a variety of other things. Even decks like Cosmos, where they run the ships and the pilots. The ships are all machines and the pilots are all psychics. So Rivalry hits most of the top decks and allows us to slow down the game state to a point where we can actually compete with them, which is pretty cool. Next off, we play more Stun, 2 copies of Mistake. We can't search, so they can't search either, right? If you have both of those out on the field against like a Monarch player, they're just going to scoop because unless they draw Twin Twisters, there's like nothing they can do. Next, we play 1 copy of Bottomless Trap Hole. Very, very standard. Kill stuff that we don't want. Prevent your opponent from playing. Same with this. Solemn Warning. Prevent your opponent from playing. If they summon anything remotely threatening, it's gone now. And for the last card of this deck, we play 1 copy of Solemn Scolding. This card is just absolutely amazing. The cost is really steep, 3,000, but you're more likely than not gonna be pretty safe on your life points because if your opponent can't get over Arya, they can't get to your life points, right? So Solemn Scolding just really, really stops your opponent from being able to destroy your traps. So Mistake and Rivalry, they're all continuous. Notice how majority of the traps are all continuous up here. All 8 of those up there. So basically what happens is you have these on the field, and if you set a Scolding along with them, if they try and Twin Twister you to get back into the game, 3,000 life points is nothing if you're locking your opponent out of playing. So this is just a really good card in general, especially if your opponent, if you use a Solemn early on the game and your opponent doesn't know yet you're playing this card, they just get completely blown out by it because, you know, you can negate an entire Pendulum Summon, you can negate any threatening spells like Monarch Stormforth or something. Anything that can basically get your opponent back into the game, you just stop them from using, and it's just great. So, yeah. That's it for the main deck, 40 cards. Going to move on into the extra deck. Alright, so for the extra deck, we run 1 copy of Gaga Cowboy. This will soon be a Traptrix Rafflesia, just because she's much better than Cowboy. And I never ever go into him, so yeah, there's that. 1 copy of Abyss Dweller, stop all the graveyard effects. 1 copy of Fairy Chirgle. Notice that she's a fairy, so she's one of the only, well, not one of the only, one of the few monsters that we're going to be XYZing into when we're playing this deck, because Rivalry stops us from summoning stuff other than fairies, so it's very, very important that we're able to summon something from extra deck just in case we need to beat over a larger monster, right? So next off, we play 1 copy of Bujinte Tsukiyomi. just if we draw into our Sopina or something, we just ditch it for more cards. It's also really good if we have some dead floodgates in hand, to be able to pitch them and then hopefully draw into more combo pieces for our own pushes in place. Next up, 1 Diamond Direwolf. Pop back rows, pop anything that you want before you go off. 1 Castel, the Skyblasted Musketeer. Spin stuff, because we don't want it, right? 1 copy of Ragna Zero. The only reason I should play this is because she's a 2400 beat stick, and she's a fairy. So, she can be summoned under Rivalry, and there's really no outs to her if your opponent doesn't have main deck monsters that are big enough to beat over this. Especially because Rivalry blocks out most of everybody's extra deck, because there's so much variance in types and attributes, although that's a little less important for this build. There's so much variance in types that they just can't play out of it. Next off, we play 1 copy of Cairngorgon. It stops things like MST and stuff, so you can redirect it to their own back row, and so they can't pop your floodgates, because the floodgates are what wins us the game. Next up, we play 1 copy of Utopia, and you know what comes after Utopia. It's Utopia the Lightning. So Utopia Lightning helps us get over really big threats, helps us get over Cosmo ships, and pretty much just there if you want to swing for game. Next off, we play 2 copies of Bloom Diva. Might cut her down to 1, but I really like her at 2, because in the Cosmo matchup, if they have Cosmojo or something, they can out 1, and you still have another 1 that can help win the game from there. So it's only really there for that. I might cut her down to 1, but we'll have to see. We don't really tap in the extra deck much anyway, because of Rivalry. And last but not least, 3 copies of Shiberta. So Shiberta is just really, really useful in this meta, just because the fact that she can just so much graveyard disruption from her. So if you're playing against Monarchs or something, and you have Shiberta on the field, they really have to think of how they're going to play, or else you're just going to banish all of their spells, all their pantheisms, all their monsters, so they can't even play at that point if you have a Shiberta and those floodgates up. So yeah, it's a very potent card. Alright, and now to finish it off, we're going to go through the side deck. We play 1 copy of Effect Veiler, just so we have 3 in case we're going second or going up against someone who has a lot of combo pieces, they're playing combo deck or something like that. We run 1 copy of Elegy in the side deck. This is mostly for rogue matchups, so she allows all special summon Melodious monsters to be immune to destruction, which combos really well with Arya, and a lot of rogue decks can't actually out that, so that's really the main reason why I'm keeping it in there, because the main deck is geared more towards combating the meta. Alright, so next off we play 2 copies of Kumongus, the Sticky String Kaiju. Kumongus is just really amazing in this deck, especially because we play Rivalry. I chose him because he's an insect, and name 1 meta deck that runs insect cards, right? So basically, if you tribute 1 of their monsters and give them Kumongus, and then you flip Rivalry, they can't do anything else unless they get rid of Kumongus. And he's relatively easy for us to attack over as well, just because we have Honest, Score, we have Shiberta, we have Sopina as well, boosted a little bit by Sonata, and we can easily run over it. It also outs problem cards, so things like Turbo Magnus, stuff like that. You can even side it in against Cosmos and get rid of their ships that way, but we have better ways of dealing with those. Alright, next off we run 2 copies of Transmodify. This is mostly if we're siding against a rogue deck, we bring in Elegy and the 2 Transmodifies, just so we have our standard little Melodious engine going if we're going up in those matchups. Next off, we play 1 copy of Twin Twisters for back row heavy decks, for Monarchs, stuff like that. You just don't want them to set up at all. We play 1 copy of Time Space Trap Hole. We can side out anything, add this in. This is really just against pendulum decks, and once I get the Rafflesia, I'll be replacing Cowboy with that. So Rafflesia can send it from the deck to the graveyard and just negate an entire pendulum summon, and you win next turn. So really useful there. 2 copies of Chain Disappearance. This is, again, to hinder Monarchs and their plays. You can hit all their little vassals, and you can also hit mermaids when they summon things like the Neptibus. So banish all copies of Neptibus, and they really have nothing to go on from there. So definitely Really useful side. It's not always going to be put in because our main deck stuns them enough. Mistake stuns mermails a ton. That is if they don't have anything to pop it with in their hand already. And for monarchs, they can't really get over mistake or rivalry if they don't have twin twisters. Next off, we run 2 copies of Mind Crush. Just when mistake and stuff's not enough, if they have something in their hand, monarchs like to reveal a lot of stuff in their hand before they go off. Or if you're playing against Draco Pals or something, you just want them to get that luster out of their hand. You know they search the luster with Wavering Eyes, you just shoot that out of their hand, and then Shuberta can banish him for good, so you don't have to worry about Ignister and stuff like that. It's just really important to know what our opponent has, because we're playing a stun variant and we want to be able to stop them. So if you know what they have, you'll be able to play around what they can potentially do, is my justification for running the card. And last but not least, we play 3 Imperial Iron Wall because Cosmos are no fun, so they don't get to have fun either. And so yeah, that's it for our side deck, 15 cards. So this deck is a little different than what I usually do, but it has definitely been working and it's been a lot of fun playing it. So yeah, thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe for more Melodious content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.